All right, welcome back to Sunrise in the World. Yes, we'll be talking about the state of the situations, the polity at this point in time. Yes, as you've seen there as well. Osita Chidoka joins us this morning, former Minister of Aviation, among several things. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Well, just a little bit of timeline, so that people can just have an idea of where this might be headed. Remember, in that particular report you just heard, the president on May 29 announcing that subsidy was gone. And when that came through, we saw the effects of the fuel price. It just spiraled. And then the NNPC themselves came forward with that price template, after which you went from, 195 naira per liter. Then it jumped up to different states, depending on where you are. We know Lagos is about 480. And then here in Abuja, you were seeing about 580 and then up to 615 at the moment. And so, but most recently, you've heard the NNPC also say, well, at the moment, they've got no intention to increase the petrol prices. Before then, though, the president did announce that there were going to be measures to alleviate the challenges, the pains, the economic hardships that lots of people were going through. So that is where we are today. So, Mr. Chidoka, from all of this, several policies the government has given, how would you describe the direction where we're headed?
It's a tough one to predict where we're headed, but I can say that I can see some worrying signals from the government at this time, some very disturbing signals. Number one on the list of the disturbing signals I see is the fact that the president took decisions of monumental impact without a cabinet. So that, for me, is a suggestion that that cabinet will not play an important role in his government. Because if the decisions about fuel subsidy and the unification of the dollar was brought to council, and you had the diverse discussions from the various segments of the economy, it will have been interesting for us to see what will have been government decision about these issues. So you will have had the trade minister giving his view. You will have heard the military giving their view. And I'll give you an instance. The 2027 budget of the military has about 29 billion. It has about almost 297 billion in capital expenditure. This 297 billion, as at the time the budget was passed, was about $695 million. So the military went on for procurement, I'm sure. All the major equipments they use are foreign-based. And then, as at June, you change the currency, you unify the exchange rate, and it goes to about 740, 750. Now, that budget of the military has been halved to $300 and something million. So they have two options: cancel existing contracts or renegotiate quantities with existing suppliers. Meanwhile, they are on a war in Nigeria, in the northeast, in the southeast. They are in internal security work. And now you've added ECOWAS, a military that is finding it difficult to find the budget to operate. So that's number one worry. Number two worry for me was when the National Assembly took the decision to appoint the minority leadership for the minority parties without the minority parties writing a letter to them saying, this is who we want. Now, the law does not stipulate you do that, but that has been the convention of the National Assembly. So what we have today is a minority leadership that seconds the motion of the majority in the House. So there is no vibrant conversation in the National Assembly about the quality of laws and decisions to be made. The third worry was that I thought that the 8 years of Buhari and the nepotism and the challenges in appointment we had with Buhari will lead us to a situation where we will have a more nationalistic approach to appointments. But Buhari destroyed the Nigerian military by allowing General Buratai to stay in the military longer than his retirement age, so a lot of officers were retired who could have made it to the top. Now, eventually, he appointed somebody from Cost 35 as the Chief of Army Staff. The guy dies in a plane crash. He leaves all the members of 35, leaves the members of Course 36, the first course in the Nigerian military that had a university degree. That was one of the most brilliant courses in the Nigerian military, Course 36. They were the first time the NDA awarded a degree to military officers. So they retired the whole of 35, 36, went to 37 to find somebody from Sokoto State. And he appointed him Chief of Army Staff. So he retired that cream of officers at the time when we needed their services most for Nigeria. Now President Tinubu comes. He leaves the Course 37, where this Chief of Army Staff is from, leaves Course 38, where the following course, goes to Course 39 and appoints a Yoruba man as Chief of Army Staff. Again, another bloodletting in the military. So we find a situation where everybody is now looking at who will be the president. Definitely the Chief of Army Staff will come from his ethnic group. So the loyalty of senior army officers is now in doubt.
Okay. If we could just take a look at some of those issues, three of those points you highlighted. The first part being the president appointing, announcing some policies without his cabinet.
Yes.
Now, help us understand how this works, because for persons like that, while they campaigned and contested, we imagined that they were all ready, that they had contested, that they had consulted with several experts in different fields. That's why they came up with several documents. So him announcing a cabinet, what kind of impact will it have? Because you still have the perm sex who could do a job. I mean, sometimes they call them super perm sex, and so without ministers. But if he had all of those people close to him, and he had consulted them behind the scenes, did he have to announce them for them to make their contributions to his policies?
Yes, you see, so that's the point. The Federal Executive Council is a body conditioned, by law, by the Constitution of Nigeria. We should have a body called the Federal Executive Council. Its powers are so strong, many people don't remember, that including, they are the ones that can say that the president is unfit to be a president. And that will lead to his loss of office. It will lead to a medical inquiry. So the Federal Executive Council represents the 36 states. It represents diverse opinion. The president does not meet with the cabinet, with the permanent secretaries. He doesn't meet with them. But in the Federal Executive Council, maybe we will have known that part of our foreign reserves is a $7.5 billion debt from foreign banks. Maybe we will have known that the amount of money we spend on bringing in crude kept the Naira artificially low because we're using crude oil swap to get it. That by allowing individuals to import oil, we are now looking at $20 million per cargo, and you are seeing that each of them is in the market looking for dollars to import the fuel cargoes. So at the time the cargo is arriving, they are already taking a decision to increase the price to meet the replacement cost. So it may have been important for the president to listen to all the dynamics of all the agencies to understand that maybe, just maybe, we may continue to use the crude swap to buy the fuel to avoid a run on the dollar, knowing that we do not have the dollars as at this time. I didn't think they knew that. I didn't think they knew that the nature of our debt, that NMPC was owing $3 billion to fuel importers as at the time he took over. So if you look at the dynamics of decisions taken, you could see clearly that the government was not abreast of the situation of the huge mismanagement of the predecessor government.
The second part, I know my colleagues will come in pretty soon, but that second part where you then say the National Assembly announced minority leadership without a list from the political parties.
Yes.
Even if the political parties had submitted the list, how was that going to affect anything? Because, I mean, the last time we've seen several persons announced, and no matter what they do, majority will always
Majority should have his way, but the minority should have his say.
But
the beauty of that,
but they still have the opportunity to have their say on the floor of the Senate.
Yeah, you can go to the floor of the Senate and speak, but the leadership of the Senate, the decision to decide which motion comes to the floor, the decision to decide how we spend the money of the Senate, how we go on recess is taking a leadership. That is where the minority could have said, no, we won't allow you to go on recess. Maybe we will have heard the different versions of what the senators will be doing as they go on recess, or whether they should even sit to clear the ministers, because a member of the opposition that is truly opposition will be sitting in that leadership. So it is important that that decision be made every day. That call to decide which motion to be heard, which motion not to be heard at that day is taken at the leadership level. So we feel that this is dangerous for democracy. And this is also dangerous for the country because we are going to be seeing a situation where we are having a one-party state. Don't forget that the challenges we are having today in Nigeria is the lack of understanding by the APC that is 8 years in office did grievous damage to the country, and that you require a new national consensus to fight this. Now, whether we discuss, look at the reaction of Nigerians to the war in Niger. I'm sure if you look at the reaction on the fuel subsidy and co, if the people of Nigeria has confidence that this government has mass legitimacy, which brings me to a point, I think we need to amend our laws to make it that any presidential candidate who doesn't make 50+1 of the votes cast in an election should go for a runoff. Because a 33% election of a president at 33% of the vote gives the president a serious minority that makes it difficult for him to push big agendas. Now, let me make it clear. I support the idea of fuel subsidy removal. I support the idea of removing the exchange rate distortions we have. But these decisions have to be taken in cognizance of the facts available on the ground. How are we going to frame it such a way that it will not have negative externalities? And we're having serious negative externalities. Food prices are on the rooftop.
What would you have suggested?
So that's what I'm saying. The decision will have been, and I made the point that if you had had a cabinet, sadly, the cabinet I see today does not inspire confidence. I don't even know whether this cabinet will be able to advise him better than the ones he has taken. But all the same, the cabinet will have been at least been abreast of the issues in their ministry, of the commitments. The military will have at least told him of the $655 million we have, we've already committed ourselves to 600 or 500. So if you change the rates now, it's going to have immediate impact on us. So all this information were not available at the time he took decisions on May 29. There was no way he could have had it.
Rate, or the rate is determined by economics.
So whatever be the rate, the government had a rate that they had operated for 8 years. People in the country begged the government to remove this subsidy on the dollar. So, and now to remove it, you needed wide national consensus. Because first and foremost, Nigeria does not produce anything in it. We're not producing the goods we use. So we are getting imported inflation. As the fuel prices, oil prices rise, fuel prices will rise. As the dollar rates go up, the prices of cars will go on. Let me tell you, to buy a Toyota Hiace today for intercity transport, the price has gone from 30-something million to about almost close to 50 million for the high-end ones. Now, what does that mean? It's an immediate impact on the prices of transport. Meanwhile, this transporter who has the one he bought at 38 will need to make 50 million to buy a new one. And then he needs to factor in the most important cost in his business, fuel cost, which has tripled, doubled in the more than quadrupled now as we are going. So looking at all of this is a delicate balancing. But beyond all of that delicate balancing is the wider national consensus that you need to have. That consensus is lacking. And the two ways you can restore that consensus, is to go back to the issue that is bothering Nigerians, whether our elections are free and fair, whether this choice was the choice of Nigerians. He needs to let INEC share that to Nigerians, because that consensus, that national uniform attitude you want, comes from a belief that, okay, this is a clear process, this is the winner, and we are fine by it. Whatever decision the courts take will not bring about that national consensus. What will bring about it is to say Nigerians are asking a pertinent question. You told us the IRF will work. It didn't work. You told us all the forms will be uploaded. It has not been uploaded till date. INEC should behave like I said during the May-Summer crisis, like JAM. Come out and say, all the Form EC8As we collected from these elections are now online. You could go there and verify. This is our election results. If you feel any of them was tampered, please say so. Well, this is winning back the confidence of Nigerians that we have a legitimate government in office. Then he can make progress from there.
Staying with the issue of consensus, somehow you just managed to tie the economy with politics, excuse me. And yeah, some people say that's why you have socio-economic, you know, issues. But when you talk about consensus with regards to, you know, the removal of fuel subsidies, some people will say that largely we had a consensus on that. Because if we look at the campaigns, all three major candidates did say that fuel subsidy was going to go. Even you here say that fuel subsidy is going to go. So when you talk about this consensus, where precisely would you say that it needs to be built? Is it amongst Nigeria's elite, or is it amongst the people who are still at sea as to what exactly we're talking about?
No, removal of fuel subsidy is not an event. It's not a single item. I'm talking about national consensus to say, pilot warns you, we're going to go into turbulence in this plane now. The plane has taken off. It will be turbulent for the next 10 minutes. Everybody braces themselves, gets ready for the turbulence. We trust the pilot. So when it is 8 minutes, it's still turbulent. Well, okay, it's still fine. It's 12 minutes, it's still turbulent. People begin to get unnerved. This is the 12th minute. By the 15th minute, you need to say something and say, sorry, we couldn't finish, you know, we still run into more turbulence. So I'm saying that that consensus is that the country needed to know the implication. And I don't think the government knew the implication. The removal of the subsidy will lead to a massive pursuit of the dollar by those who import fuel.
I'm not surprised that you use you know you use synonyms or will I say metaphors related with aviation. You're a former Minister of Aviation. But I'm looking at the fact that we all knew that we're going to run into turbulence. That's what the point I'm trying to make. Everybody saw the headwinds and they knew that anybody who came, regardless of whoever took over office, Nigeria was heading into turbulence. It was already clear. So would you say that any president who had taken over on the 29th of May had the luxury of time to say, you know what, I'm going to take time to decide whether or not I really wanted to take away subsidy or when we're going to take away that subsidy, given that the budget, there was nothing, there was no provision, it was going to last till the end of June. And even that budget, we're already borrowing. We're neck deep in debt, as we still are. So would you say that the president had the luxury of time to determine or even tell those who were watching at that point in time that, look, I'm not going to continue with this particular policy?
Yes, he had the luxury of time. The luxury of time he has is that he had to know which of the two policies, how would the policies go together? If we remove fuel subsidy, are we going to also unify the exchange rate? If we unify the exchange rate, are we also going to stop NNPC from using crude sales for swap to bring in the fuel? Because don't forget, NNPC was the sole importer until May. So removing the subsidy is not an event. It is one of the decisions that IMF told us to take in his Article 4 consultation. He said remove the subsidy, unify the dollar. But it is on a precondition, it's on a presupposition that the government will have enough dollars to meet obligations. So there were two issues. If the government had not put in place a funding mechanism, either go back to the IMF and say, we're taking these decisions, but we need a $4 billion stopgap financing so that we can meet the immediate needs of our dollar needs. Or you look for elsewhere to borrow that money because, as you said, the government did not have the money to pay for these items.
To borrow.
So they needed to, yes, they needed to find
do you think
that financing.
Nigerians can actually hear another
That's
item
the problem.
or another word that has to do with taking on more debt? You
yes,
think that
Nigerians will have heard the word because, you see, when you do this stopgap financing to find the dollars, everybody is lying to everybody. The government will continue borrowing. And if borrowing means telling the CBN to give you the Naira equivalent of dollar that doesn't exist, that's still borrowing. That's what's going on. It's no dollar coming. So the government is taking money from the central bank. So it is important that we think about this in a holistic manner. It is important that at the end of the day, that there is a Nigeria and Nigerians who will bear the brunt of this policy. Looking for the dollar stopgap is in order to be able, once you open up a demand, there will be an initial wave of demand, but it will stabilize. That stabilization period, that turbulent period I'm talking about, that 20 minutes of turbulence, is something you need to prepare for and say, when I do this, I'm going to find the foreign exchange to pay for this. And now, like I said, we just found out from NNPC's 7 years account that part of the money we call our foreign reserves are not ours.
And that's because the CBN books were opened.
Now, the CBN books were opened because the government now needed to rationalize its decisions. Which takes me to something I'm saying. We should not harass regulators. If the CBN governor has done something wrong, you should allow an audit to happen in the CBN. You should allow for a query to be issued to him. He should be made to face the music by going through a process. Using the State Security Department to arrest him is equals to harassment. They should release him. Look, the EFCC chairman has been in detention for how long now? How do you want another EFCC chairman to take decisions against anybody who he sees has the potentials of getting power tomorrow? Let the EFCC board query him. Let the EFCC, let him face through the process. Let the EFCC as an institution,
go through
punish him, go through a process.
Let me take you up on this issue of NAS and the opposition, I mean the minority leadership which you raised. And some people will say that it is no longer as simple as it looks on the surface when you talk about the election of, well, let's say just leadership in general, because we also saw the battle between parties within the ruling party, you know, the majority party within the National Assembly, and how they too were sort of resisting the intervention of their own party leadership within. They eventually had their way, but it was, you know, a very tough battle. Given the fact that we now have, you know, a number of opposition parties, would it have been as easy as you say when you say that the leadership of the political parties should have been allowed to write letters to the National Assembly to determine who their leaders will be?
Of course. The biggest minority party takes the minority leadership. The second largest in number takes the deputy. There are clear ways of sharing it. It's not... We've done it before. The MPP was there in the House before. AD was there. We've been done before in the past. It's not new. Why are we behaving like if Nigeria started again today? Since 1999, we've been doing that. Yeah, so what is required is that PDP bring us the minority leadership. PDP will go and conduct an election. There may be opposition inside PDP. I want to be, you want to be. But once we settle it inside PDP, we forward a letter to the National Assembly. This is who the caucus have chosen. So it may still have returned the same people.
Isn't that what happened?
No, that's not what happened. The parties were not involved. They said it's only a business of the senators. So
if there was a vote on the floor, so if they were angry, couldn't they have said, well...
No, you see, that's the thing I'm telling you about this democracy. You know, this is the first time a real politician is in office. So he just played the politics. They knew who they wanted. They collected the signatures of those they wanted. So Abaribe was the minority leader of the PDP when he was in PDP. And you saw how he behaved in the National Assembly. Is that what you're seeing today from the minority leadership we have?
What? We can't say is their style? We don't know what goes on in those kind of places.
So my point is that in a democracy, we need vibrant opposition. We need communication.
Speaking about opposition, pardon me to jump in there.
Yes.
I'm just wondering the role of opposition in this country.
Yes.
And not just now, over time. I mean, we see in some parliaments, they constitute what they call a shadow government.
Yes.
If there's a policy here with the government, they come up with an alternative policy, which they think, look, we think if you apply it this way, you will get this kind of results. We don't see that here.
Because first of all, we're not a parliamentary system, so we don't have shadow cabinets.
Yeah, but we don't have to be parliamentary to come up with those ideas.
In presidential system, you don't see shadow cabinets. But let's talk about the ideas that you talked about, which is what you're hearing from me. This is the alternative view. You shouldn't have done this at this time. You should have done this with this. And we will soon start publishing our regular papers on government rule. Now, the PDP in itself was a party in government for 16 years. Its instincts are that of a government party. It's not that of an opposition party. And it has taken us 8 years now to begin to realize
Smell the coffee.
We are smelling the coffee that, well, it's not just 4 years and we're back. You know, it looked like we're just gone, we're just coming back the next day. Now we are beginning to see that PDP itself needs to be reformed. PDP itself needs to renew itself. It needs to reimagine itself to begin to play the role of opposition. Knowing fully well now that we have a politician as president, if PDP does not get its acts together, it will be an extinct party. So we need to wake up, smell the coffee, find the kind of leadership that will represent us in an opposition atmosphere, and begin to do the work of opposition, begin to do the work of mobilization, begin to imbibe the work of technology. Our last 4 years has taught us a bitter lesson that a young party can come up and take away PDP's strongholds in one election cycle. So there are so much for us to learn as a party, and I'm hoping that by the time the court cases are over and PDP is able to drop all the law cases affecting the chairman that was removed, then we can go back to PDP as an opposition party and how we will fare going forward. But so far, I think that what is important is that Nigerians are committed to seeing that we take the right decisions to make progress. But in doing that, we're saying that the government has to understand that you need the governance infrastructure. You need to think through policies. You need to win back the confidence of the people. You need to show Nigerians that the effort of the last 8 years will take us almost another 8 years to recover. But in that, you need everybody to come on board.
Yeah, but isn't it clear? I mean, so sometimes people say that these things usually happen at an elite level, and that maybe what we should be talking about is an elite consensus. When everyone sees that the ship is about to tank, I mean, shouldn't everybody be pulling together and seeing how it is that they can come together regardless of whether or not they voted the captain?
It's easier said than done. And it's the point about elite consensus in Nigeria. It is critical that we have elite consensus. Part of the elite consensus is increasing worry I have that we're beginning to get to the point where the big man, the strong man, can use his wherewithal and take power in Nigeria. In the days of the MPN, it was a consensus. They came together and brought in a Shagari who didn't have the resources to be president. Even President Buhari didn't have the resources to be a president. So we need to go back again to that system where there are people who come together. Because the idea that the president determines who is the chairman of the party, the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, and all of that is an anathema to democracy. Because what happens is that they can sit in a room and he says, this is how we are going, and everybody says, yes, sir. Well, if you remember that Shagari cannot say that because Umezoke was from the MPP in the House of Reps. Joseph Wires was in the Senate. Akinloye was a strong national chairman of the MPN. So you dare not look at Akinloye and say, this is the decision. No, he has to represent the interests of the MPN, of the party. So we need to go back to that democracy where the elites come together to choose leadership. Because the idea that we can, a strong man, the resources is the key to becoming president, as we are seeing now, is going to portend grave dangers for Nigeria's democracy.
All right, well, we have to anchor at that point. Mr. Osito Chidoka is the former Minister of Aviation. We will be back in just a moment, so stay on with us.